Okay, we are in Mount Vernon, and when I was told that this interview was happening in Mount Vernon, the immediate question that came to my mind, where on earth is Mount Vernon? Never heard of it before, so I picked up the phone, called one of my colleagues and asked, where is Mount Vernon? Because that will determine whether or not I do this interview. He says, well, it's somewhere north of the Bronx in New York, and that wasn't good enough, so I Googled it and found that it's actually pretty interesting, little county, borough, what is it called here in Westchester in New York. And there we have a pretty interesting gentleman, and well known as well. His name is Nigel Spence, who is chef of a restaurant. It's not, you didn't call it a restaurant, you name it Ripe Kitchen and Bar.
Ripe Kitchen and Bar.
Ripe. There must be a reason for calling it Ripe. And there must be a reason for not saying restaurant but kitchen instead, and we will delve into that in just a moment. But Ripe Kitchen and Bar is where we are, well-known, is it shack? How do they call it in Jerk Shack? Jerk
Shack, if you want to call it that, yeah.
That's what it was called back in Jamaica. So that's what we will talk about. But first, let us meet Nigel Spence, who I'm told traveled to New York, moved to New York at the age of 11. Can you recall that?
Yeah, it was very difficult for me to move from Jamaica at that time, coming here, because at that time I was just forming a lot of friendships in school and in the neighborhood and stuff. So I was kind of just pulled because of the political unrest we were having in Jamaica. So my family found it probably better for us to be here, at least temporarily, for us to get past that. So it was a little bit difficult, and especially the fact that I came here in the winter, which made it a little bit more difficult.
So, is it anything like it is now?
It was very similar. This was back in quite a few years back. I don't want to age myself.
But they say if you age well, it's all right.
Well, see, now you had asked before about the name Ripe Kitchen and Bar. I don't know necessarily how well I aged, but let's see how that works out.
most certainly, and we're doing this, filming this interview at a time when it's quite cold.
Yes.
In New York as well, and
one of the worst winters we've had in a long time.
So that brings back memories of all this many years ago when you were 11 years old.
Oh yes, as soon as that door opened at Kennedy Airport, I was ready to head back.
And there was another shock, I'm told, for you, that you couldn't find your mango trees.
Exactly, because
Tell us about that.
Came here hoping to, I knew nothing too much about the United States at that time. So in coming here, I'm assuming that they pretty much had the same things that I had in Jamaica. So I'm looking around for my mango trees and for the guava trees and stuff like that, and noticing I'm not seeing too many of those things. I'm seeing more like oak trees that don't bear fruit, and everything almost like a barren land. And so I was like very upset about that. And again, one more time, ready to get back home.
Total shock it was.
Yes.
Yeah, you missed that. So let's go back to Jamaica then, the pre-visit and move to New York. Let's go back to Jamaica. What was life like for you there?
Life for me was a regular kid, lived in Kingston with a family of 7 kids and my parents, and grew up in a home or a house that had quite a few fruit trees, mango trees, that sort of thing. So we're always experimenting with food outside. My brother and I, the 2 boys of the family, would always be outside messing around with fruits, and as they call it in Jamaica, running a boat, where you'd be outside, cooking outside and stuff like that. My grandfather would be very instrumental in putting that together for us, because he actually lived right next door with my grandmother. So it was a whole little nucleus of a family there doing that sort of thing in Jamaica. So
7 of you, 2 boys.
2 boys and 5 girls. Yes.
Goodness me, it must have been fun.
And me being the youngest also, I kind of got pampered a little bit.
It must have been a whole lot of fun.
It certainly was, because they had a lot of friends that would come over.
Yeah, the last of them all. So tell us about it. How did the sisters treat you?
Sisters were very civil to us, I would say. We actually kind of, my brother and I formed a little bond and a little thing where we were the outside ones in the yard, and my sisters would be inside. They would do the baking, the cooking, the cleaning, that sort of thing inside. My brother and I were outside with the outside cooking, the charcoal, the big pot outside with my grandfather. That's what the men did. So that's what we were quite having a great time doing outside. So the girls did the girls thing inside, the boys did the boys thing outside.
And your grandfather would later have a tremendous influence on what you end up doing.
Certainly, because of that type of cooking. I mean, don't get me wrong. My mom certainly had a great influence on me also because I was the youngest. So I was left in the home with her when everybody else was at school and stuff. And I used to move around with her in the kitchen, kind of dragging on her tails there, just, you know.
She'll be happy to hear that.
Exactly. But,
it's not all granddad.
Exactly. But apart from that, most of the cooking that we did as boys and like with the other boys in the neighborhood was when we would put a little thing together outside and experiment with all the different fruits, vegetables, and the occasional stolen pigeon or stolen chicken from the neighbor down the street and put the stuff together. So, but we, exactly. But we also had a huge chicken coop, as we call it, in our home also. So, you know, sometimes we'd exchange, and like if somebody else had a pigeon and we felt like eating a pigeon today, we'd kind of exchange a chicken for not quite the same size, not quite a fair exchange, but it worked.
But it worked.
Yeah.
And so you learned to cook at a very young age.
Yes.
You're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Very much like a lot of young Caribbean men because you were outside and had to do things on the outside.
Right, and I didn't realize how important that was or how beneficial it was going to be for me when I came here to New York, because I realized that a lot of the women here were not used to men knowing how to cook, and so that was a big bonus with the ladies when I came to New York.
Well, I'm told that you actually got into this thing because of the ladies.
I don't know where you got that from.
That's what I was told. So look, you know, and let's go to what you did before you actually opened your restaurant in 2003. Radiologist or.
Radiology, yeah, I was a radiology tech in that out of high school, didn't know what to do with college and not sure what direction we were going in. We had just come here, as I said, so we didn't have much direction from anyone who lived here before, so we didn't really have anybody's path to follow, to say that. So decided to go into radiology, which basically is a glorified name of an X-ray tech.
Yes.
And did quite a bit of that for a while, but the hospital environment just wasn't for me. And I used to
Hospitality was better.
Hospitality was much better than the hospital environment, exactly. Yes. And so for that reason, I mean, I always cook still on the side, and so I think my passion just kind of ran towards that direction after I just felt that the hospital environment was just a little bit too confining for me, and I like to see happy people, and there aren't too many happy people in the hospital.
And pardon me for saying that, but you know, there were no girls.
And there were no girls.